If you're like me, you don't want to buy a whole new console just for a single game. That just seems like a waste when I could put that money into buying a graphics card which would make literally every other game on my PC run better. But recently, I've been on a little bit of a Soulsborne kick, so you can imagine how limp my dick was when I realized I needed a way to play Bloodborne, which is in PS4 jail. And that's where PS Plus comes in. While you have a premium PS Plus membership, you can stream select PlayStation games to your PC, similar to Google Stadia. I've been subscribed for about 4 months now, and during that time I've played Shadow of the Colossus, both the original and the remake, Ghost of Tsushima, Bloodborne, and Wolfenstein the New Order. Now, I don't want to waste your time, so the short version of my thoughts on the service for PC streaming is that it's a bit of a mixed bag. The fact that you can use it to stream PlayStation exclusives to your PC is hard carrying the service right now. But for a more in-depth look, be sure to stick with me for the rest of the video. Now, the biggest question I think that comes to mind when I think of game streaming is the quality, so let's bring that up first. Now, according to the PS Plus website, you're going to need about 5 megaburbs down to stream, presumably at 720p, and to get to 1080p, you're going to need about 15 megaboops down. As you can see, my internet speed easily beats this, but the quality didn't really look how a crisp 1080p would typically look on my monitors. It always seemed pretty compressed, and it definitely sometimes dropped down to 720p. To be fair, with game streaming, I think some visual quality loss is to be expected, so it didn't really bother me too much. But then again, 1, I usually care more about the gameplay than graphics, and 2, I typically play on a 22-inch monitor, so if you have a larger monitor, the decrease in quality might be way more noticeable. So if you're someone who really cares about graphics, this might bother you. Might rustle those little jimmies of yours, huh? I should also put the disclaimer that this is obviously just my personal experience, and yours could vary depending on a lot of factors like how your computer is connected to the internet, like with a wired or wireless connection, or you have a shitty internet provider that'll throttle your data speed, or you have a shitty provider that'll shut down half the country because it's a monopoly. I live pretty close to a major population center, so I would assume that I live close to a PlayStation data center, but I couldn't find a way to check to be sure. Besides graphics, the other major factor is lag. Because you're essentially playing a Twitch stream, there's really no way for you to not have input lag, and my experience dealing with this was, you'll have some days where the service just runs slower, maybe your internet is, just having a bad day, or somebody's downloading 12 gigabytes of porn in the other room, or maybe even the service itself is just being shitty. Sometimes you'll have these little visual artifacts pop up like you'd see on a Twitch stream if your connection was choppy. I've even had moments where I've completely lost control of my character while the game lagged out. But luckily, these more noticeable interruptions tended to be pretty infrequent. The issue is more about how this baseline level of lag affected the gameplay of the games themselves, and this varied a lot by game. For most of the games I played, I found it pretty manageable. Like, both Bloodborne and Ghost of Tsushima are games which require pretty precise timings, but I was able to learn how to compensate for the lag. It just requires you to predict a little bit more in advance of when you need to press a button to, say, attack or dodge. So despite some rough spots in each game, like the Father Gascoigne? How the fuck do you pronounce this guy's name? So despite some rough spots like the Father Gascoigne fight in Bloodborne or some of the standoffs in Ghost of Tsushima, I was able to beat both games. Where the input lag really ruined the experience for me, however, was in Wolfenstein the New Order, particularly because it made it extremely difficult to aim. See, the similarity between the first 3 games I mentioned is that they're all third-person action games, while Wolfenstein is a first-person shooter. While Bloodborne or Ghost of Tsushima might have more tight timings than Wolfenstein, the input that you're using to determine these actions is binary. You're pressing buttons or the triggers to attack, dodge, pick up items, whatever. And since a button is either on or off, it's a lot easier to compensate for the lag. As I said earlier, you just gotta press it a little bit sooner. But in an FPS, using the thumbstick is crucial. It's how you aim, it's how you look around. And rather than being binary, its input needs to be constantly measured by the system and adjusted by the player. You use the thumbstick to look around in those third-person action games as well, but you never really need to be accurate with it. You just kinda need to position it roughly to get a good idea of what's happening on screen. But having my character's head movement constantly lagging behind my real-life actions made Wolfenstein's aiming feel extremely laggy. It was really hard to track enemies, and I struggled even on the easiest difficulty. I seriously felt like a fucking toddler playing this game. Also, something about the way that the game took so much control away from me and the limited console FOV really made me feel nauseous, and I usually don't get nauseous in video games, even when I'm playing in virtual reality. Eventually I just said, fuck it, I'm not paying a subscription to have such an awful experience, so I dropped the game and decided to put some more time into Ghost of Tsushima. But speaking of subscriptions, if you're enjoying this video and want to see more content like this, consider liking and subscribing. It will really help me out, and it's free. How about we talk about some positives? Right now, the service has a pretty strong lineup of games, from old classics to new hits. I mean, you can play games like Ghost of Tsushima, Death Stranding, God of War, and Red Dead Redemption 2 all for the price of one subscription. It's important to note, however, that this may change as games are rotated in and out of the selection over time, so check out whatever's available at the time you're watching this video. But before we move on, I gotta just say, this launcher, the UI is so bad. Can I have a search function, please? And can I see everything in these categories in a simpler list format? Painfully slowly scrolling through these shelves is like going through a box of old CDs and makes browsing the selection at a glance way more difficult than it needs to be. Another major positive is that you can play this on any computer so long as your internet connection is good. So if you don't have a computer, or maybe you're just traveling with a laptop, you can still access these AAA games. All your saves are stored on the cloud as well, so you can switch between devices without losing any progress. But enough listing positives and negatives, let's answer the big question. Should you, a PC user, be using PS Plus for streaming? Well, a big part of that is going to come down to pricing. PS Plus requires you to get the highest tier subscription in order to stream to PC. That's going to be $18 US a month, which isn't a lot, but could add up to a lot over time. And that's not to mention that even on PC, you're going to need to use a PS4 or PS5 controller. Now, I hear there are some workarounds to this for using other controllers, but if a game you're playing uses the touchpad at the top of the PS5 or PS4 controller, if you're not using a DualSense or DualShock controller, you're just not going to have that functionality. Luckily, the PS5 is kind of ancient now, so you should be able to pick up a controller for pretty cheap on the secondhand market. But anyway, the controller adds a one-time purchase of like $15 to $50 depending on the price you get it at. So if you don't have one already, you'll need to factor that in on top of the price of the subscription. Now with all of that in mind, PS Plus streaming for PC has two major things going for it, but only one of which is actually unique to PS Plus streaming itself. Firstly, as I touched on before, if you don't have a great PC, this is a great way to not only access PS4 exclusives, but also a bunch of games which are already ported to PC. But this is really a benefit which is intrinsic to all game streaming platforms and is one of their major selling points. So if you find one which offers better quality streaming or better selection of games, then all things being equal, you should probably go with that one instead. But definitely don't get this to play FPS games, oh my gosh. And if you have a PC that can play a non-exclusive, it's probably better, honestly, to just wait for a sale so that you can buy the game and own it and download it to play at the proper quality. So with all that being said, the main thing going for this service is being able to play PlayStation exclusives. Because of Sony's monopoly on these games, this is pretty much the only way to play some games without dropping hundreds of dollars on a console. Like I said at the beginning of the video, I only really found out about this because I wanted to play Bloodborne. Besides this or buying a console, your only real option is to wait for a port to be developed for an exclusive that you want to play. And Bloodborne players can tell you how that's going. And that's why I think PS Plus, at least for PC streaming, is a bit of a one-trick pony. It doesn't really offer anything unique besides allowing you to play some games that Sony normally forces you to buy a console from a scalper to play. Unless Sony really improves this service, I don't think it can compete with its main competitor, Xbox Game Pass Ultimate, on any other front besides exclusives, at least when it comes to PC streaming. And Xbox Game Pass Ultimate is actually cheaper and lets you download PC compatible games so that you can play locally on your machine instead of having to stream it at a lower quality. Now, if you don't care about owning the games that you play and aren't too picky about graphics and performance, then it could totally be worth it to subscribe for a month to PS Plus Premium, beat a few games, and then at the end of the month, unsub. $18 is definitely cheaper than a lot of games at full price, and if you don't care about replaying it, maybe it's a single-player story game, then you might not care about losing access to it when you unsub. However, I personally don't think I'm going to stay subscribed to this service in the same way that I subscribe to Netflix. If there's an exclusive that I really want to play, then I might sub for a month or two just to beat it, but I'm not going to stay subscribed for a long time. But maybe I'm just stupid, who knows? I'm just a guy with a microphone, a green screen, and an opinion. Do you have PS Plus? What was the experience like for you? Comment down below. Maybe my experience was an anomaly and you'll give people a better idea of what to expect. And if you enjoyed the video, give it a like and or subscribe to the channel for more artisanal homebrew gaming content. Thanks for watching.